kick on anyway. I'm Andrew Ruffler, Chief Executive of Professional Liverpool. Thanks to Peter and the team at AI for working with us to pull together this event. It's another one of the virtual events that we've been pushing, I suppose, almost since the end of March. We've refocused our outputs from the physical to the virtual environment. So we're very keen to see how these kind of events work for you, our attendees and members of the sessions. The focus of this particular event is collaboration. And those of you who are members will have seen as a recurring theme in our newsletter, our weekly newsletter, where I put a bit of an introduction. It's something which is at the very heart of Professional Liverpool and the community that we support. So, you know, the benefits of having a session that focuses on collaboration and cooperation between businesses is really, really valid. I think in this post-lockdown world, how businesses can collaborate and cooperate to survive and, of course, be resilient going forward is becoming an absolute priority. So I'm looking forward to viewing and participating in this session, and I hope that those of you who've joined us as attendees will really see the benefits in participating also. Peter mentioned the chat session is open, and I've noticed that a number of you have started to introduce yourselves, which is great. Peter and Paul, who are the representatives from AI Change Management, will, I'm sure, encourage this chat to continue throughout the session, encourage that engagement. I'll be monitoring as well to see if there's any questions that are worthwhile firing to Peter and Paul towards the end of the session, but I'm sure you'll welcome that yourself and you'll be keeping an eye on it yourself, Peter. So with that brief introduction, I'd just like to kick things off. I think we're handing straight over to Peter Lawrence from AI Change Management, who will hopefully guide you seamlessly through the session. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Andrew. Rory, I've just had a few texts from people who are trying to get in. I think they're in the waiting room. So I don't know if you need to click a button and let them in, open the door. That would be great. And then a few will join. So yeah, thanks so much for joining. My name is Peter Lawrence. We incorporated AI Change Management in May of this year. Previously, my practice was based in London, always lived in Liverpool. And AI doesn't stand for artificial intelligence. It stands for Orton International, and that's the name of the law firm who kindly invited us in to share their premises at 8 Water Street. So that's all it is. We're a change management practice specialising in all things change. And one of the issues that we're being asked to think about at the moment is about collaboration. How we collaborate across the city for the benefit of all. And there's a lot of talk about collaboration. Interestingly, I'm sensing maybe more action is needed. And this call really is just to test who's interested in collaborating, who's interested in sort of getting into a shared space, learning together, sharing ideas together. And sort of stepping back from the busyness and just thinking about how we can do things together. Now, we were going to break out into smaller rooms, but we had a few IT issues this morning with Zoom. So I'm going to suggest something slightly differently in how we use the hour. I've got a very short introduction to the idea of collaboration. And then we've got a short story to share with you. And then rather than break out into rooms, what I'm going to suggest is have a think about 2 questions I'm going to raise and then put them into chat. And then Rory, if it's possible, we can unmute people and ask them to actually amplify their thought about collaboration. And what I'd like this session to be is action orientated and action outcomed. So leaving us with some things that we're going to do. Because I'm really fed up about talking about collaboration. I think we need to get into sort of what it means. And then we're going to close at the very latest at 10:30. So hopefully that's okay. We begin with the concept of collaboration and the basic assumption that it's a useful thing to do. So think about that. I was invited into a workshop last week with 8 charity sector organizations, all looking at roughly the same sort of group, customer group, benefactor group. and they all were coming at it on the purpose of collaboration. And as soon as I started to prod about, okay, so let's share our finance resource, let's share, there was a real sort of drawing back. And whilst people acknowledged the concept was useful, once you start to get into what that means in practice, there was a real sort of pulling back. And I was reminded then about a quote I've used by a guy called Dr. Jack Shepherd. Now, he's fictitious, and it's from the series, I don't know if you recall, Lost. So what I'm going to ask Rory to do is, first of all, show a short video clip from the TV series Lost that just sets the context. And then Rory, pass back to me, and I'll then lead us into the actual quote. And that, hopefully that will generate our thinking about collaboration. So this is from the TV series Lost. It was the original trailer, and it basically set the context about the whole story that lasted for years and years. So Rory, over to you, and if you could share that clip, that would be great. Thank you.
So how's the drink?
It's good.
That wasn't a very strong reaction.
Well, it's not a very strong drink.
Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot has switched on the seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
Don't worry. It's gonna be over. Must have been at about 40,000 feet when it happened. An air pocket. Dropped. But we crashed 1,000 miles off course. They were looking for us in the wrong place.
Stranded on an island. No one's coming for us.
This place is different. We all know it. We all feel it.
It's been 6 days. And we're all still waiting. Waiting for someone to come. But what if they don't? We need to start figuring things out. We need to figure out how we're going to survive here.
What was that? Did anybody see that?
Terrific. My main concern is keeping us alive.
We need to get off this island.
You think any of us would be here?
We're all here now. We can't live together. We're going to die alone.
Do you really think all this is an accident? That we, a group of strangers, survived? Do you think we crashed on this place by coincidence? Each one of us was brought here for a reason.
And who brought us here, Jack?
The island.
So I don't know if that brings back memories for you about the whole program, but that gives you the context. There were people going on a plane, and then the world changed. And there's some parallels there, I think, for us in the sense of what's happened to us over the past 6 months, unexpected. And now we're in a very, very different landscape. And it takes us into a period of change. We can't sort of deny that. We can't get off the island just by thinking positive thoughts. We need to maybe do something differently. So when they're on the island, Jack becomes almost the unofficial leader, and factions grow, people fall out with each other, and then he comes out with this quite thoughtful and provocative quote. So we'll play the next clip now, and they're on the island, it's dark, they're around the fire, and then Jack shares his insight into the situation. And think about the relevance, the parallels with where we are now as a society in Liverpool. So Rory, if you can show the next clip, that would be great. Thanks.
It's been 6 days. And we're all still waiting. Waiting for someone to come. But what if they don't? We have to stop waiting. We need to start figuring things out. A woman died this morning just going for a swim. And he tried to save her, and now you're about to crucify him? We can't do this. Every man for himself is not going to work. It's time to start organizing. We need to figure out how we're going to survive here. Now, I found water. Fresh water up in the valley. I'll take a group in at first light. If you don't want to come, then find another way to contribute. Last week, most of us were strangers. But we're all here now. And God knows how long we're going to be here. But if we can't live together, we're going to die alone.
As I watch that quote again and again, there's so many sort of concepts, thoughts that spring out at me. And so, you know, we could live every man, every woman for themselves, but that's not going to work. Work for whom? That's a question. No one's going to come for us. No one's going to help us if we don't find a way out of this. And then there's the big quote, that the one I want to focus on is this: if we don't live together, we're going to die alone. And that was the concept I shared with that group I mentioned a few moments ago in my introduction. And that was the harsh reality of what I shared to them. I said, look, I'm not a prophet. I've got no crystal ball. But I guess that in 5 years' time, if we as a group don't learn to live together, many of the organizations around the table will cease to be. And if you carry on in name, you won't be as impactful as you were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that takes us to the whole idea of collaboration. And maybe we think, well, you know, we could lose business because we could be collaborating with our competitors. So what's the issues that throws up? If we do collaborate, in what areas could we collaborate? And it's a whole concept of real collaboration. We just made a short video with people from one of the business sectors, the fashion industry. And Beth, who's a fashion designer, shared a concept of why we collaborate. She said this: collaboration holds a fashion industry to account. And that was something I'd never thought about before, about sort of the power of collaboration. And she said it holds the fashion industry to account in terms of ethical trading, ethical fashion, ethical design. It's just another aspect of the whole concept of collaboration. So the two questions I was going to share in breakout were simply this. And it's based on the assumption that we're coming at this, that collaboration is something we should explore at least. That's, you know, I'm not saying it's the panacea of all ills or the, you know, silver bullet, but at least we should be considering practical collaboration. So the two questions are these: in what areas could we collaborate in the city? And secondly, and most importantly, how could we make it happen? And that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for, is to go with people who have a passion for making things happen. One of the things I shared on LinkedIn this morning was my reflections over the past 6 months and what I've learned. And I haven't shared what they are yet, but I'll let you into a secret. One of them was to follow the energy. So if I email people and they don't email me back, I'm not going to chase them. But for those people who do want to collaborate and want to get involved in doing something good, that's where I'll go. That's where I'll follow. And to be honest, I'm delighted that you're here, because the fact that you're here tells me, not in words, but in actions, that you're in the space and at least you want to talk about it. So that to me is very, very powerful. And I would rather have, you know, 10 people in a room talking about collaboration and doing something about it than 1,000 who just talk. So let's just, capture those two questions. In what areas could we collaborate? That's question one. And question two is, how can we make that happen? So if we can look at the chat, and Rory, if you can unmute people as they want to share a concept and an idea. I know it's not the same as breaking up into smaller rooms, but I'm hoping we can have some conversation around the big room. There's 14 people in the room. Visualize each other and let's listen to each other. So Rory, if you could look for people who are either in chat, offering a comment, and unmute them and invite them into the conversation, that would be absolutely fantastic.
There's also an option for everyone to just like a raise hand option, and then I'll be able to see if you do that and I can allow you to talk. Apparently that's the button.
Any raised hands?
Good morning.
Morning, Tove.
I sometimes, when I speak about collaboration with people, find that people don't necessarily fully appreciate the range collaboration can cover, from very informal networks and knowledge exchange through to strategic alliances and very specific areas to very formal partnerships. And it might perhaps be worthwhile trying to set out that working together is not one form, but can consist of many different forms. And therefore, the organization, if it doesn't feel it can commit to something very formal and structured, can actually still enjoy the benefits of collaboration by working in informal knowledge exchange networks.
Yeah, great point, Tove. And I really resonate with that. That's often, I invited some people into the call today from larger institutions, and they felt they weren't allowed, really. They didn't have the permission.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, that's fascinating. I said, but it's just a conversation. No, we would need permission to do that. And, I find that amazing. But you're right, Tove, it's that recognizing that it's the informality of a coffee through to a formal sort of partnership agreement of a multinational and everything in between. So it's a change in thinking, I guess, yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent insight, thank you. Anyone else in terms of hands raised or questions? Hazel.
Where I'd probably say, just to drop in, we're a law firm that set up about 4 years ago, and we we have a legal entity and an unregulated entity where we collaborate with consultants across all different business services. What we found, even just in our early stages of developing that, is if you drop the mindset of the element of competition and also defensive territorial working, we found that obviously the knowledge sharing really does enrich each firm, even if they are in the same specialism. So we work really quite nicely with other lawyers in the sector who've been around a lot longer than us, but we see their elements of adding to the jigsaw puzzle, and they see ours as almost like specialists, with finite tools that are on business legal services. And it's almost like sharing of the knowledge to the big boys, the smaller boys, the medium boys within the sector has worked from when we incorporated 4 years ago, but specifically over lockdown, because we've never seen it ourselves as competition.
Yeah.
And they think, we're willing to open the door and work. So they develop a relationship where we're referring, which is getting stronger as the years go on, and seeing a value in it. But equally, because we don't see the competition, we actually see the collaboration for the client. If we're collaborating, we're bringing something more beneficial to the client because they're getting the all-rounded service. And there's no territory boundaries. We're learning from how each other are operating. And we found that through lockdown, particularly because, you know, some of the larger entities are like, well, how have you got back to the office, or how are you, you know, phase returning, or how is that working? And it's like, well, we're smaller, but we can be more nimble and dynamic, but we can help others react in that way and change that mindset that might be cultural.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, isn't it? That you've got some learning there about collaboration that is gold dust for other sectors. So, you know, so sharing your story, because I am finding that, oh, collaboration, competition, are they enemies? Well, they needn't be, you know. They could actually be helping us to be more competitive by being more collaborative. So I think you've got a real story there to tell, and hold on to the thought, because I'd like to develop that later, if I may.
Of course. I've found it's helped across different sectors, so not just sector specific, because I used to work in maritime sector prior to this for about 3-4 years, and it was really interesting what they would generate culturally within the maritime sector to actually work cross networks, cross sectors, because just because you're in one sector, why shouldn't you be, you know, sharing with another? Because actually, ordinarily, it's business, so it's the same model. Yeah.
Thanks, Hazel. Agnes, so you're on. You've got something to share, I guess.
Good morning, Peter, and a very big thank you for being here and for sharing with us. And very, very big thank you to Rory and all the team at Professional School. I totally agree with what Hazel has just shared with you, because for me, collaboration has been a major part of my life for a long time. I learned quite a while back that just because two people are in the same industry, like a couple of solicitors or accountants or whatever the sector, does not make them competition as such. If they very often speak with each other, they can actually learn from each other. And what I learned from a group of accountants a long time back, two particularly young accountants deliberately avoided each other because they saw each other as competition. But actually one specialised in tax while the other specialised in whatever. And therefore they could put clients to each other. So you could argue if they're competition or not, but actually they were able to bring business to each other.
Yeah.
Because we all know the old saying that two heads are far greater than, you know, just the one. And I think collaboration is very, very important. The big question is, how do we do more of this around Liverpool to help everybody?
Yeah, and that's what I want to end with. But so stay the thought, Agnes. And I guess if those two people had never had the conversation, they would never have known.
Correct.
You know, and that sense of sort of going beyond the thought. Yeah.
They only met because they both turned up at a networking event I was sharing a lot of years back when I used to teach people to network professionally.
Right.
And that's where they met.
Fantastic. Yeah, wonderful. Dave, you're in. Dave Verberg, do you want to contribute?
Morning, everybody. I'd just like to echo what both Hazel and Agnes have said. I think one of the things I'd like to see maybe some collaboration on, and it's difficult because we can't all know everything what's going on in the city. But I currently sit on the advisory board for Blackburn House, who do with social enterprise, and I think that's one area where we could see some really impactful collaboration there, especially for, I think Hazel mentioned some of the larger organisations earlier on. So between like the council, private sector and the third sector. And for me, the whole rising tide raises all ships. Yes. Is a key concept. We want the city to be the best it can be. And so I think if we can sort of drop that whole bravado of always trying to be the best individually and be the best together, I think is a much better way and a much cleaner way to look at it. And, you know, it's things about community-based support over time. How can some of the bigger organisations help some of these third sector organisations that are looking to make a difference in the smaller sectors of the community for a particular cohort or a particular like target market group, where instead of everybody trying to grab everything, the human is not. I'll just put in the chat before. We as a human, we are a herd species. We don't succeed on our own. I mean, I'll often speak about when we left. If we go through what we believe to be how we evolved, and we all left the eastern continent of Africa. Yeah, it wasn't one guy called Steve on his own who just walked off and said, "I'm going to go and check out the rest of the world." And the others never let Steve wander on his top. They all went, "Oh, we'll come with you. Come on, we can't. We all go together, and we'll go and see what's out there together." And so, right from the very start, that whole collaboration thing has been it's ingrained with us. I just think we need to be more open to it. Agnes made a couple of good points, and she'll know I've worked in networking for years, and the number of times you introduce people who do the same thing and they can actually work together, because there's things that some of them either haven't got the skills for or don't particularly want to do, and the other person has got the skills and wants to do. So so that's the one for me.
Great, Dave. And I'm not going to break confidence, but we're quite new to Liverpool. So although I've lived there all my life, my business was always London. So it's 7 o'clock train down most days to the capital. So in Liverpool now, I can ask some stupid questions because I'm new. So I worked with that. Well, I didn't work with them. I was chatting to a large organisation in the city, and who are very confused in themselves about who does what. And I said, well, let's get some clarity. And the bottom line was, I think, I'm making an assumption, they would rather live with the confusion than the clarity.
I suppose what they're scared about, what the clarity is going to bring them.
Absolutely. So that sense of all the stuff that you talk about, I'm going, yeah, why not? Why not? And all the people I'm talking to are so frustrated with the lack of collaboration. As soon as we start to sort of move in and say, okay, so let's get some clarity, there could be a loss of status, a loss of, et cetera, et cetera. So, but let's carry on, and let's keep asking the questions. And I've got some ideas to leave us with in terms of action outcomes. So, Elaine, you're in. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Peter. So about the question of how we collaborate across the city, what areas we could collaborate in, I think from my viewpoints and my research and my discussions with clients and members of my network, I just think that just generally sharing our knowledge, sharing our learnings, discussing what we've done to survive, how we've adapted to survive. It could be discussing things like what changes we've had to make to bring staff back into the office, to encourage people back in, what's happening with our office space. There's that whole question about office or no office at the moment. People are having to look at new ways to find new business. It has the way that we will look to find new business changed moving forward. Will it change? And, I think it's just recognising that we are all facing very common issues at very different levels, because we're all different size of organisations. Your point was very interesting about the large organisations feeling as though they shouldn't really get involved in this conversation. And I suppose that's because perhaps their thinking is not shared thinking across the organisation, whereas the smaller businesses can maybe step forward, discuss things together and make decisions on change easier. But I think the shared knowledge, shared learnings and what we've done to survive is useful to educate each other, but to inspire each other to have that hope to drive forward. And hopefully, from my point of view, if a number of us step forward into a group and start this initiative, or this movement, if you like, to collaborate on a formal basis, it will have a ripple effect that would hopefully encourage others to follow suit. It may look to change the mindset across the city, because we all know that ultimately relationships are the absolute lifeline of business. And what we're looking to do here is just further embed those relationships, enhance those relationships, to turn them from just we know each other well, we trust each other, to we're actively going to support one another. So I'm just really interested in the answer to the second question as well, how we could make that happen. I've been thinking about this.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
Go on.
What?
Feel free.
So, what's the answer to the second question?
Well, I'm extremely interested in the answer to the second question. I've got my own take on it.
Go on.
Would just be really interested to see how we can formally establish something that isn't replicating what's already out there, is within easy reach of whoever needs it, and is going to have the most effective, quickest impact, really. I suppose discussions like this is where it begins, really. Andrew might be able to add a comment in that we had a recent discussion with a group of people on a roundtable event, and it was around ways of, how do we pull together, how do we support each other to help the economy, the LCR economy, to recover better, quicker. I'm interested in other people's responses to that second question as to how we can make that happen, because that is the big question now.
It is. And that's a segue that we didn't practice, Elaine, did we, about leading in the second question? How are we going to then, let's talk then, because we've only got, 15 minutes left. Okay, let's talk about how we can make that happen in sort of more of the, not in the sort of rhetorical sort of, let's talk about it. What could we do practically that we could sort of move the conversation on and sort of drop the pebble in the pool? So any sort of, anyone who wants to comment, Rory will unmute you, and I'm seeing names, but just give a shout out if you're in the space.
I don't know am I still muted?
No, Dave, you're not.
Okay, I wasn't sure. It's a good job I've kept my counsel then, isn't it?
I heard you.
Yes. I think I've just put in the chat box, the first thing practically we need to do is, I believe, and it's easier said than done, is to park egos. But to be able to park egos, we need to have an understanding of what each individual stakeholder, for want of a better phrase, requires. What do they need to be comfortable, to be collaborative? What has to be, what's their safe space? What's their fears? What do they need for them to be able to give, knowing that their boundaries are safe? And I think that's the first thing, and that's the biggest challenge, because well, one, a lot of people don't know this, just like you mentioned before about the bigger company that would rather stay confused than have some clarity. So a lot of people don't know this. But if you can park the ego and understand what the other person you're looking to work with is looking for, and see how you can have that desire to then fit in together with that, that's the basis. Because if that's not there, nothing else comes.
Yeah.
And it's call it trust, call it whatever you like, but that has to be in place, because if there's an element of doubt about how this would work, then there'll always be that little holding back before wanting to actually give and engage. So I know that might be a little higher level stuff, because you asked them what can we do practically. Well, that is a practical thing first. You have to start from that. Otherwise, no one will engage effectively.
It goes back to what Elaine was saying, and think about the relationship. Yeah. And as the relationship grows and develops, then trust sort of grows, and you know where the boundaries are. Whenever we do anything with client groups, we always begin with what we call a check-in, which is trying to sort of get people into the room, not just in their physical presence, but all the stuff that's going on in their head, sort of. And it's amazing how people then start to share things that you go, okay, I understand. I'm not saying I agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. And it's a really useful way of sort of getting people emotionally engaged with each other, because they're starting to understand a bit more. We also had a comment from Hazel in the chat room about public-private sector joining together. Now, there are about 4,000 civil servants in the city, and I was one of them. And the sense of, they can't enter our space because they're not allowed. So we've asked the powers that be to write to the Cabinet Office Secretary and say, will you give your permission for people to start to enter into networking across the city? Now, you may think that's bizarre, but that's the only way they're going to join in the conversation, if they have permission. But then starting that conversation, opposite our office is India Buildings, which is going to be the new HMRC regional centre. the building has been sort of cocoon now, in this sort of web of intrigue almost, because the special, you can't go in there, it's secret, whatever. I know it's not, and we could access so much of that estate just to share a room, but we need permission to do that. So there's lots of benefits I perceive for that collaboration across the public-private sector, that we're trying to push, but we've got to get them permission, if you like, to enter into the space. Any other? Also, yeah, sorry, Dave, go on.
Just say, after permission, they need empowerment, because it's all right giving them permission to go and see and to network and to go and see others. But if there's a hesitancy about being comfortable in actually making a decision, or if they're worried about what they say when they go, then again, that's going to hold it back. So permission, but they need to feel comfortable that they're being empowered to actually have some sort of autonomy, if you like.
Yeah.
That's the right phrase.
Well, Dave, I was the tax credit office director for Liverpool in the early 2001, 2002. And I had 1,100 staff with no IT. The IT shut down. And I was looking out of Graham House onto the tax office, and there was a queue of people going for new tax credit office advice. And the tax office couldn't cope with the volume. But I had 1,100 people looking out the window saying we could help. So one of my managers said, Pete, if we send 50 people down, we could clear that queue in half an hour. And great idea. I'll just check with the central team in Whitehall if we can do that. And they came back and said, no, you can't. You can't do that because we can't offer that service across the country. And I put the phone down and I said, just go and do it.
Yeah.
So we did it. And then afterwards, I sort of got forgiveness. But that's the mindset, you see, of sort of how central government operates in a local setting. And it probably didn't do me personally any favors with the hierarchy, but in terms of my staff, they were going, that's great, because we want to get out there and help and make a difference. Yeah. So that's the challenge that we're coming up against is that permission stuff. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions before we just start thinking about landing this with maybe one or two actions we can take away with? Hazel, you're unmuted again. Did you want to make a comment?
Probably only just add really to what yourselves have spoken about. I, many moons ago, worked in the public sector, so I'm now in private, so I kind of understand both sides. I think it's one of those where the private sector may or may not understand, obviously, the trials and tribulations of the public sector, having permission. Wow, who knew, of being able to actually attend some of the networking events. So it kind of appears that, well, where are they? Why aren't they attending? Why can't they? And it's almost like telling communication. It's like anything, passing on that knowledge and those stories of what prevents public sector from being able to engage in such things. And also an understanding from the private sector of that actually, with those permissions and with, needing the empowerment and almost the confidence to actually speak out with the private sector in attendance. It's the understanding of the private sector, actually what the public sector have to go through, jump through a few hoops, takes a little bit longer perhaps to actually get, decisions or opinions put out there because of how the public sector is built. So it definitely is an understanding and an acceptance of how each sectors work, because the private sector potentially just want to go in and own it and take over the world and do it. You'll probably hear a lot of the professionals being quite outward speaking about stuff like that, and that's easier for them because they own their own companies, with partnerships or whatever, and they can do that because what's preventing them other than themselves or the directors in the stack? But it's that understanding and perhaps the storytelling between the public and private that needs to start first, to understand culturally how they are different, to almost like, in a museum you have artifacts to understand how a culture works a certain way, but it's almost like a museum or a storytelling effect that you build up between public, how they work, and how private work, and then finding a common ground in the middle of actually how can we really make this work, because we accept each other's differences, but how do we make it work, because there's something really tasty in public and something really tasty in private that we want to work and join. And I suppose that's a joint piece that needs to happen beforehand. Obviously, you know, the public needing permission to attend first. It's interesting.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And yeah, we've both got, I've worked in both, and both have opportunities for collaboration that are untapped, if you like, untapped knowledge, untapped skills, untapped resources. You know, we're not, as you were saying, Dave, about that joining up. And, you know, some of my colleagues who are in the civil service would love to go and give a week of learning in a third sector organisation, in leadership, for example. But it's this whole thing about, you know, are they allowed and are they permitted? Right, time is racing away, and I want to just end with Andrew. I'm going to give two possibles as the way forward. And the first is, and I know people are in different spaces, so feedback to Rory after the event, you know, how this works for you. We're now back in the office in Water Street, and we'd be really happy to host a lunch and learn or a glass of wine after work one evening, just to say, hi, this is me. Going back to Dave's point about sort of, you know, understanding a bit more, Elaine talking about building the relationship, or any individuals who want to come in and have a coffee with us, more than happy. So that would be the first offer I'd make, is some type of lunch and learn, or a nibbles after work, or whatever, just to sort of carry on the conversation. But the second one is that we are looking at partnering with an educational establishment at one of our universities on a leadership program, and they're looking for a collaborative community from the business sector, and we are now seeking partners who are going to say, yeah, I would like to continue that conversation, and we'd be interested in that sort of learning around leadership. Now, leadership is common across all sectors. Some people think they're better at it than others, but we all need that capability and capacity in our organisations. So we are in that sort of quite advanced stage, and now they're saying, so who are you going to bring with you then? And there are quite a few sort of powerful partners who are, but you know, if we can bring people from our community in Liverpool to it, then that would be really, really powerful, a powerful coalition collaboration. So there's two specific asks that we'll put out after the event. One is, who's up for just carrying on the conversation, and we're happy to do this, or we can make it sort of a face-to-face event, either at, well, whatever really. You can use our office, or we can use one of our other venues across the city. And the second one is a specific, do you want to join some form of steering group to actually shape how leadership can develop in the city through an educational establishment? So they're the two specifics I'll leave you with. If there's any other closing gems that anyone would like to share, put them in chat or raise your hand and Rory will invite you in. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Andrew. And Andrew, closing thoughts and any insights you've got to offer about what you've heard over the past 45 minutes.
I'm intrigued to hear what Elaine's saying about drinks on exchange flags.
Oh, I've missed that.
Oh, you've missed that one, have you?
Actually, the word drinks was not mentioned, Andrew.
Oh, sorry.
I've just said exchange flags on a sunny day for outdoor networking. So you've visualised the word drinks there,
well, which of course
is a great idea.
To be fair, Elaine, that's because he knows you so well. That's Elaine, Courtney and drinks together in the same sentence.
Anyway, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Peter, and thanks to all of the attendees for contributing. Rory privately in the chat actually said to me that it's the most engaged he's seen an audience at one of these sessions. Obviously, between us, you know, Rory and I, we've been on tons of these over the last 3-4 months. You know, me in particular, either contributing or or just listening in. And I have to say that the chat has been phenomenal. Loads and loads of great comments and ideas which have been forthcoming. And for me, that just is, it shows what a fantastic example this kind of event is, to demonstrate, I suppose, demonstrate the benefits of collaboration and cooperation, and what Professional Liverpool stands for ultimately, which is bringing that professional community together, facilitating conversations, which hopefully then leads to collaboration. And the other thing really interesting, we had a conversation around our board table last week, and one of the things that came from it was a load of C's. And I spent the whole of this session just jotting down, again, words beginning with C. So Peter's got 2 behind him: creating capability. You know, we've spoken about collaboration, we've spoken about connections, we've spoken about community. I think this is all really strong. I think the challenge for us now, and this also links into a bit on the chat that Julie from DWF was pushing. It's about turning that chat into action, isn't it? And I think there was some really good comments there that Julie was making around how Professional Liverpool, as the body that represents the community, can facilitate the action kind of thing. And of course, we do have sector groups, some of which are more active in inverted commas than others. But these should be the forums to continue the conversations around particular issues in the city region, and what we can do collectively, another C, to respond to those issues, and how we can then bring individuals and companies together to deliver on those. So I think it's been a really, really good conversation, which hopefully, Peter's given a few ideas on how that can then continue, as has Elaine on exchange flags. So hopefully, I just think it's a fantastic example of how these type of small bite-sized Zoom/team meetings can really have a positive benefit, really. Yeah. Anything you wanted to add to that, Peter?
No, just to re-echo really, and so if it's okay with Rory, I'll put a message out after this, Rory, that you can share. We've just done a short 4-minute audio visual as well on collaboration that we can share in that as well. And then you know where we are. So Elaine's coming in for coffee on Tuesday morning. It's only Friday morning. Sorry, Elaine. It's only coffee, but it's good coffee. So and just having a chat, and seeing sort of where our similarities and differences are. So that's open to anyone really who in the city. Just give us a call, come in, have a coffee. We'll find out about you. You'll find out about us, and just it's emergent. Let's see where it goes. But on the 2 specifics, we'll also put in the email about, coffee on the flags or wine on the flags or whatever. And then the other specific one that we're moving quite quickly on now, because we've just put sort of the proposal in, is about this collaboration around leadership. And if anyone's interested in joining with us on that, we'd really like to hear from you sort of by the early next week. Yeah. So thanks, Andrew, and thanks for hosting, and thanks for Rory for all the hard work in the background of all the sort of mechanics of making it work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, before we all sign off, I think there's a way of capturing the chat, isn't there? So if Rory can perhaps capture some of that chat and circulate it around the delegates, I think that would be really, really useful.
I'm pretty sure I can save it as a document. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Rory.
I'm pretty sure I can save it as a document, and then I could send it out to everyone on an email or something.
Thank you.
Great stuff. The final thing from me, and I think you always learn things from these sessions now. So this is the very first one I've done in the Professional Liverpool office. So I've learned, 1, there's an echo in the room, so we need more soundproofing. And 2, presumably on Thursday mornings, they empty the bins down the side street. So all the way through, I've been thinking, please don't unmute me, because all you could hear is the trundling on the cobbles of these huge bins. So I think at least I've learned, don't have a Zoom on Thursday morning in the PL office. But otherwise, great.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you to everybody on behalf of Professional Liverpool for participating in that really good session.
And thank you from us as well. Take care. We'll be in touch soon, folks.
Thank you.